What if your next grocery bill, your job security, and your country's future were all being rewritten right now, and by just a few bold strokes of presidential power? In 2025, Donald Trump isn't easing back into the Oval Office, he's coming in like a wrecking ball. With massive tariffs shaking global markets and immigration raids leaving entire towns in chaos, the US is undergoing one of the most radical policy shifts in modern history. Whether you cheer it on or fear it deeply, you can't afford to ignore it. From farm fields to factory floors, from grocery stores to courtrooms, this is a moment that touches everyone. So if you've been wondering what's really going on beyond the tweets and headlines, you're in the right place. Let's cut through the noise and get to the heart of Trump's shocking moves in 2025. The return of Tariff Nation. On April 2, 2025, in a fiery televised address now known as Liberation Day, President Trump declared the beginning of a new economic era. He claimed America had been economically enslaved by weak trade deals, foreign manipulation, and years of appeasement. To change course, he invoked emergency powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping tariffs on nearly every country doing business with the United States. Initially, a 10% blanket tariff was applied to all imports. But it quickly escalated. Canada, one of America's key trade partners, was slapped with a 35% tariff effective August 1st, unless it renegotiated key energy and agricultural agreements. Brazil saw a 50% rate on metals, coffee, and sugar, while countries like Japan, Mexico, and the EU were hit with increases of 15% to 20%. Markets reacted swiftly. On July 11th, after Trump's renewed tariff threats, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 300 points. Businesses scrambled to adapt as supply chains strained under uncertainty. Some began hoarding goods, resulting in port congestion and inflation on several imported products. By July, the U.S. had collected more than $100 billion in new tariff revenue. The Trump administration praised the move as a victory, pledging to reinvest the funds into tax cuts and domestic manufacturing. But critics argue these tariffs function as hidden taxes, disproportionately affecting small businesses and American consumers. Immigration raids return harder and louder. While tariffs shook the economy, Trump's immigration enforcement strategy sent shockwaves through communities across the nation. In mid-June, the administration launched a nationwide crackdown on undocumented immigrants, especially targeting workers in agriculture, hospitality, and cannabis cultivation. California's Central Valley became the epicenter of this action. What made these raids different from previous crackdowns was the level of military support. President Trump authorized the deployment of National Guard troops to assist U.S. immigration and customs enforcement agents. Drones and helicopters were used in some operations. Communities were caught off guard by the intensity. In Los Angeles, entire neighborhoods went into lockdown as ICE conducted day-long sweeps, often without warrants or court orders. Tragedy struck on July 10th when Jamie Alanis, a longtime farm worker in Ventura County, fell to his death while attempting to flee an ICE raid at a cannabis farm. Witnesses said the raid occurred early in the morning, and workers were unaware of what was happening until they saw men in camouflage pouring into the fields. Alanis tried to climb over a barn wall and fell more than 30 feet. He died the following day from his injuries. The public backlash was swift. Civil rights organizations, local mayors, and members of Congress condemned the raids, calling them inhumane and legally questionable. On July 11th, U.S. District Judge Claudia Lopez issued an emergency injunction halting ICE operations in California that lacked individualized suspicion or a judicial warrant. In her ruling, she stated that the federal government had crossed a line and violated basic constitutional protections. Who's winning and who's not? The Trump administration has pitched both the tariff policies and the immigration crackdown as wins for American sovereignty, national security, and economic revival. The U.S. Treasury, meanwhile, is cashing in. With over $100 billion in tariff revenue already collected and projections topping $300 billion by year's end, the administration plans to fund tax cuts and a Made in America infrastructure boom. But for every winner, others are hurting. Retailers reliant on imported goods are seeing costs surge. Auto manufacturers are pulling back. while farmers, especially those needing cross-border trade or migrant labor, are feeling intense pressure. Immigration raids have hollowed out entire industries. California farmers say up to 70% of their workforce is gone. Hotels in states like Arizona and Florida are canceling bookings due to staff shortages. Even business owners who support Trump's overall agenda are calling the rollout chaotic and economically harmful. Consumers are paying more at the checkout, while American exporters now face new trade walls from key allies. The courts fight back. Legal challenges are stacking up. In May, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that Trump's use of IEEPA to impose tariffs without congressional approval was unconstitutional. The court declared that economic policy, especially when not directly linked to national security, must go through Congress. The ruling is currently stayed pending appeal, but it sets up a major Supreme Court battle that could determine how much power a president really has in shaping trade. Meanwhile, the July 11th injunction against ICE operations in California may also end up at the Supreme Court. The Trump administration argues that immigration enforcement is a federal prerogative and that states cannot block it. But legal scholars say the Constitution does not allow for warrantless searches or arrests without individualized suspicion, even in immigration cases. The tension between federal authority and constitutional rights is quickly becoming one of the defining legal fights of Trump's second term. The global response. America's allies are not staying quiet. Canada has promised retaliatory tariffs of its own if Trump's August 1st deadline isn't rescinded. Prime Minister Scott Bellamy called the 35% tariff economic warfare in a friendly disguise and threatened to hit U.S. beef, lumber, and pharmaceuticals with countermeasures. Brazil has already moved forward with retaliation, slapping U.S. soybean and pork exports with a 40% tariff. European leaders are holding emergency trade talks, and Japan has paused negotiations on a pending digital trade agreement with the U.S. There's growing concern that Trump's actions could ignite a broader global trade war that drags down multiple economies. The human cost. Back home, the human toll continues to rise. Workers like Jamie Alanis represent a growing list of people caught in the middle of a political storm. Immigrant communities are increasingly afraid to send children to school, seek medical care, or report crimes. Local businesses are closing, not because of poor performance, but because they can no longer find workers willing to risk showing up. Even supporters of tougher immigration laws are beginning to worry about the optics and the results. Several Republican governors, including those in Georgia and Iowa, have asked the White House to revise its enforcement strategy. The White House has responded by introducing a new guest worker visa program, but critics argue that it's too little, too late, and does not apply to the millions of undocumented workers already in the U.S. What comes next? The next few months will be pivotal. Trump's tariffs are scheduled to expand in August. More court rulings are expected in the fall. And the impact on the 2026 midterms is already being felt. Some Republican candidates are doubling down on Trump's policies, while others are cautiously distancing themselves, especially in swing districts with large immigrant populations or trade-dependent economies. If Canada and other nations move forward with retaliation, the U.S. could see a second wave of price increases and business disruption. Meanwhile, federal agencies are bracing for a surge of lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of recent actions. The biggest question now is whether Trump's shock and awe approach will reshape the American economy. Either way, the battle lines are drawn. We promised clarity, now you have it. We've taken you through the facts: Trump's massive tariff plans, the immigration raids sweeping California and beyond, the winners and losers of these policies, the court rulings challenging their legality, and the global consequences already starting to unfold. The story of 2025 isn't just about politics, it's about people. It's about the price you pay at the checkout, the help you can find at work, the rights that are being tested in courtrooms across the country, and the voice you'll use when you cast your next vote. If you've made it this far, you now understand how Trump's decisions are reshaping America in real time and how you can stay informed. So whether you support these policies or oppose them, one thing is certain: they are not business as usual. Want more updates like this? Stay tuned, share, subscribe this video, and let your voice be heard. Because in 2025, information isn't just power, it's survival.